Hi guys, welcome back to the Log Burners Lounge. Today we're at my place, Oak Farm, based in Kent.
And over the next few episodes, we're going to be showing you how you can turn this into a profitable business.
We're going to be showing you the ins and outs of running a firewood business.
So in this episode, we're going to talk about sourcing timber and what it means to grade your wood.
So here at Oak Farm, we get a mixture of all hardwoods, locally sourced from managed woodlands. When I say it's a mixed, we typically get quite a lot of ash at the moment due to the ash dieback, but it is a mix. We get occasional bits of beech, oak, sycamore and other good hardwoods. We do also source softwood like larch just for kindling production, but we don't currently do any softwood logs.
So it's important to know that every time you buy timber, you will always get something different. Different types of timber are valued at different prices. So you can buy oversize, you can buy what I will class as chipper grade wood, so something about this diameter, or you can get your standard size, which everyone loves, and they call the cream of firewood. What would you say that, 10 to 14 inch roughly, 8 to 14 inch. So it's always good to know what you're buying and how much of it you can get.
Yeah. So here we actually get a mix of absolutely everything. Due to the price, it's slightly cheaper, and we have the facilities here to grade out the timber ourselves. We also have two different processes that takes different sized timber.
So Archie, can you tell us what you mean by grading? I know what you mean, but can you tell everyone what you mean by grading your timber?
So when we get a load in like this is a typical load we get in. It varies from kind of 6 to 8 inch all the way up to oversized that we actually currently process ourselves. We get the digger and we take out all the small timber and put that aside for our Palax C750, and we run that through either a 4 or a 6-way knife. And then anything above 250 mil we run through our Firewood factory that has an X-shaped splitter on it that takes us down to the square logs that everyone loves.
So if you don't have the facilities to grade timber because you haven't, let's say, got a big machine with a grabber or anything like that, you can purchase graded timber, but it does come at a premium price.
Yeah. So when I first started off, I was buying somewhat graded timber. It was all smaller because I had one processor and I didn't have any form of moving the timber around apart from a forklift. So we typically got a load into the yard and we wanted to process every single stick with just one processor. Them loads were costing slightly more than the jumbled mix I get now, but now we're going through the volume, we can take absolutely everything and make use of it all.
Now with graded timber, so when you grade your own timber or you buy graded timber, it often speeds up the whole production process, so you won't have to adjust or move your wedges as much depending on what machine you're running. So if you're running a conventional processor with a basic 4-way or 6-way head, if you're running something that's 6 inch and then you jump up to something that's 8 to 10 inch, you may find that you need to change your heads quite often. Now if that's already graded, then you can literally just pile up your deck, feed it through, and you'll get consistent size throughout. Now the better machines, the bigger machines that cost more money, which you can build up to, often doesn't really matter, like the Splitter 400, whilst you have to grade it to a point, the X-way head always gives you pretty much perfect logs. But just bear it in mind, grading makes a massive difference to production and quality of firewood.
Definitely. So you'll always get bigger timber and you'll always get smaller timber. Smaller timber I find dries quicker in the cord, like as in the lengths like we have now, but in turn takes longer to process on a processor. It doesn't matter what processor you've got, even the fastest, you will be slower at producing logs than you will one big bit of timber through a bigger processor. So it's all swings and roundabouts really, and how much budget you've got. So it definitely comes from progression. Everyone's got to start somewhere. You can get a smaller processor that processes smaller timber for quite a good price point, but obviously it's going to take longer to process the same amount of timber for someone with a bigger processor and bigger timber.
Sourcing timber comes with its own challenges. Sometimes you find it's very seasonal, so the harvesters can't always get in the winter or wetter months. So you have what I like to call a prime time. So your prime time for getting timber at a reasonable rate is, I'd say, anywhere between April, May, all the way up until October, depending on the quality of the year.
Yeah.
The closer you are to woodlands, the better it is. The further away you are, then you're gonna have to source from all over. But a quick tip, when you're looking online for timber harvesters, fellas, to purchase your timber from, I see a lot of people type in cordwood for sale on Google, cordwood for sale on Facebook. Now, sometimes that works, but if not, look for local timber harvesters and fellas, search that instead, and you'll find a lot more companies that may or may not have anything. Give them a call, ask them if they've got anything. If they haven't got anything, get them to save your number, or you save theirs and give them a ring in a few months' time, and 9 out of 10 they'll have something by then.
And off the back of that, if you're driving past somewhere and you see cordwood, providing it's safe, you can actually stop, try and find a machine, get their attention, providing it's all safe. And it's good to speak to people, going to speak to them, see if they've got any stock, and building up connections like that is really, really good. I'm quite lucky here in the southeast. We're quite close to a lot of hardwood woodlands, quite a lot of them being quite unmanaged, so a lot of them now are actually being managed, and there's a lot of timber coming out. Us here at Oak Farm typically source timber within 20 miles of our yard, so we're quite lucky, but I do know people further up north, like yourselves, quite a lot different, typically within 50 miles maybe of the yard. So
for us, sometimes it could be as far as, well, I'm based in Leicester, so we can sometimes order all the way down from Surrey, even this way. Yeah. We can go all the way up north, because what I've found is the East Midlands is very hit and miss. There's been certain projects on, like the HS2 project, where there's been more timber available and local estate clearances. But what you do find is it's very hit and miss, because there are a lot of firewood producers in an area with, I wouldn't say not much woodland.
Yeah. Well, it's more arable fields than anything, isn't it? It's more open farmland than woodlands. You typically get different species. In this one, we've got oak, beech, ash, and we've even got some hornbeam. Now, different species dry at a different rate. So I typically section out different woods into different piles that dry at the same speed. When kiln drying, I like to make sure they're all roughly the same species, so you know every log is dry at the same time. You don't want to be pulling out dry ash but wet oak in the same batch.
It's always good to identify your timber and plan ahead, so you know exactly when things are going to be ready and when things aren't going to be ready. So whether you plan a year in advance, a few months in advance, however you run your business or are planning to run your business, it's always good to know what you've got and when you're going to get it.
So carrying on from planning, I have already started putting loads aside for my season stock next year. So we've got this part season cord in the yard. This won't be touched until the weather starts to turn, hopefully in February, March. This will then get processed into vented bags and put up to our second depot, where it will further dry and be ready to burn by kind of late September.
Now, you can't always plan so far ahead. Every business has a different dynamic. So some years you might get so far ahead because there's loads of timber available, and then some years there might be nothing available and you're living a bit hand to mouth with your timber. What I've always said is always keep your options open. So for me personally, I can't speak for Archie, but for me personally, I do take hard waste and I do buy in cordwood, and I tend to buy in a wide range of cordwood, even if it's not something I particularly want at that point, just in case, if I have the funds available, just in case. So I can say, well, if worst case scenario, I can have a bit of a slower processing time on some more difficult stuff, but that will be saved for, I don't know, a rainy day. If I have a really good pile by the end of the year and I think, well, let's just get through it now then.
Yeah, I like to say it's better than money in the bank. At the moment anyway, over the past few years, timber has gone up quite a lot. So having timber running through to the next year has been very good thing for me to do, really. Timber's getting harder to get as such. So as I say, timber's better in the yard rather than money in the bank.
Now, another thing to bear in mind also is the prices fluctuate dramatically up and down. So 1 minute you could be buying for £80 a tonne, £60 a tonne roadside. Sometimes you get £90 a tonne delivered, depending where it is. Sometimes I've heard people paying up to £150 a tonne plus VAT.
Yeah.
And I've touched base on that with Paul in our last video. So if you get offered a really good price and you've got cash flow there to get some extra timber, 100% buy it. On the other hand though, if timber's really expensive, my feeling would be don't go all in on it. Get what you need, hold back a bit and see what the market does moving forward. But it's a constant thing you've got to monitor it all the time.
Yeah, so it's a market. It does fluctuate up and down. Firstly, depending on species, ash, premium ash in the right grade will probably be the most expensive, or beech. Oak is good, but it typically takes quite a long time to dry, so some people don't like it as much. You've also got the market up and down for the time of year. So early winter, from kind of September onwards, typically businesses have some cash flow from pre-sales, and the timber market knows that, and they also know that the winter is coming and people need stock, so they tend to put their prices up a little bit more. The cheapest you'll find is in the middle of summer, when it's really easy for the harvesting guys to cut and extract it. But for us, if you haven't put the money aside, you don't have the cash flow. So it's all a big game, and it is really down to planning ahead. Yeah,
so I've always ever had a look at firewood business like a big circle. 1 minute the problem's timber, you need more timber. Next minute it's you need a bigger processor, you need a way of processing. Then it's a delivery vehicle, then it's staff, then it's cash flow. And in order to get it all the way back round, if you do everything in a method, your cash flow always increases to a point. But you'll come back round in a circle again. Oh, I've got a new machine, it's a big machine.
But now I can't dry it.
I can't dry it quick enough, right? I haven't got enough timber. And then
there's always a bottleneck.
It's always chasing there, no matter what you do. But one thing I do want to just say for any of our harvester friends out there, we're not necessarily saying anything's too dear or too cheap. Obviously, we understand what goes in, what you do to get your product to us or for us to come and collect from you. It's just how the markets are, goes up and down, and we do find quite a few farmers and stuff order at the end of the year as well. So I tend to see more seasoned, no pun intended, firewood producers ordering start to middle of the year. And I see a lot of last minute people who go, right, firewood season's here, let's order firewood. That is a very big mistake, and I would urge you not to do that if you can, and you'll save yourself a lot of money in the long run. Yeah,
definitely.
So let's go on to the topic about oversize, because there's a lot of controversy, whether it's good, whether you can make money from it or not. What are your thoughts on oversize?
So obviously all different sizes, you're going to get it in when you get a mixed load. I am lucky enough to have the space to store timber. And like I said, I get all the load in, I take what I can from it and process then. But there is obviously oversized. We've got quite a big stack here, and we've got another one over the other side. I use this somewhat as like a savings account. I know it's there, it's in my yard, it's drying. You can resell this from your yard, but the likelihood of getting your money back is going to be quite slim, because you've already paid for the haulage to get to yours. But yeah, like I said, I use this as a bit like a savings account. What I will do is get a hired machine in, a big processor, and we can process this over a summer. We typically save up oversized for about 2 years, maybe 3, before we then get a big processor in to make it worth our while. I like it. It's drying, it's in the yard, it's not going anywhere.
So for me, when I first started, I was logging up with a chainsaw, say by hand, and splitting either by hand or with a two-way log splitter. And I always found that a nice way. It felt very traditional. And it was a good way to build some money, because the last thing you want to do, if you are running a chainsaw setup in a two-way splitter, in my opinion, there's nothing worse than logging up loads of small stuff.
Very true.
I'd sooner log up bigger stuff, have less to handle. Yes, it's a bit heavier. Just bear in mind, don't go too big, else you'll need something to lift it. But anything this size, ring it up, put it on your split hole, crack them in half with your axe, and I think it's a great way just to keep things flowing if you ever need to. I have some oversized too in the yard.
It doesn't take too much longer to ring up a bit like this than it does a 6-inch bit.
No.
Yes, it's very slightly quicker to cut, but the actual movement and moving each ring up to the splitter takes the same amount of time. So you're going to get a lot more wood out of a ring, out of an oversized piece of wood, than you do a small piece of wood.
Yeah, so time, not much difference, but the amount you get per cut, massive difference.
If you want just oversized, oversized tends to be a little bit cheaper off the stack if the harvester guys separate it. Sometimes they leave it in the loads like I buy, but sometimes they also do take it out. It will be slightly cheaper, and for the guys that are splitting up by hand, or you've got just a splitter 400, you can ring this up. If you need to, you can split it in half with an axe once, and then you can drop it in to the splitter 400 and make a lot of quality logs quickly.
And if you do end up with some really nice oversized, I've seen where people haven't separated anything on the actual estate, you might end up with some really good milling grade wood.
Yeah.
So always be on the lookout for what milling grade wood looks like and what oversized firewood looks like, because you don't want to be giving away a gold mine, because you do get a lot of money for milling wood.
Yeah, very true.
Bear in mind, no matter what grade of timber you get, you will always get some bits that are a bit bendy. That doesn't mean that you've had a bad batch of timber. Like this here, you will get bits of that in your stack anyway.
Yeah. Typically, you will find between 5 and 10% of the load will be a bit bendy, knobbly. If half of the load is really bad, then you really need to speak to your supplier and sort it out, unless you're paying an extremely cheap rate. At the end of the day, time is money. You will get processors that will deal with bendy timber better than others, but firewood is a grade, and if it's really bent, it should be going to be chipped. You don't want to be paying premium prices for bendy wood. With that percentage of bendy slash knobbly wood, you can cut it up and make it right that you can process it. So this might not be such a problem on a big processor. What you can do is cut the knots flush and really smarten them up, and a processor will tend to then accept it. If it's really bent, cut the log at the bend, and that will then create 2 straight pieces of wood. You just want to maximise the timber you've got, basically.
So one thing I would say about running a firewood business is it's not about whoever's got the best kit can do the best work. There is a level of experience involved. So you'll have your axemanship, you will need to use an axe at some point. You have your sawmanship, doing your logging or dressing your timber. You have to maintain your equipment, maintain your saws, know when something goes wrong. If you haven't got much chainsaw experience, then it'd be very difficult to understand why your processor may not be cutting as well, or understanding how to dress your wood. So it's always good to gain the experience you need by practicing. Even if you don't need to use an axe, keep your axemanship right, keep your sawmanship right, and everything else should just fall into place quite nicely.
Yeah, definitely.
That's it for this episode. Thank you very much for watching. Join myself and Archie next week as we talk you through the firewood production process and getting your product out to the end user. If you haven't already, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button, and see you next week.